Hey there and welcome back. So in the last step, the very first step we did in our pose capture TensorFlow.js enabled component that we're building, we just started with a template. Rather than starting from scratch, we started from a template to build our web component. And there's a couple ways to do this. I chose lit.dev. So you go to lit.dev, getting started, and then choose the starter kits and start with the TypeScript starter project. So this gets you straight to GitHub, and you can clone a template from there, starting your very own project, your own component. So that's what we did so far. We have a lot of stuff in place right now for starting a new project. So now we can start customizing this for our own component, or as we will be doing, we're going to make a few different components, so our own component set. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of the example starter component that came with the template. So let's get rid of myelement.ts. So now we can add our own components, and I'm going to start small here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add something called base player. Now you can notice right away that it has a lot of TypeScript goodies at top, like interfaces that we're defining, so we can talk about the player state, whether it's playing, if you're scrubbing it, if it's being recorded. When you get down to it, this is our base class. So our base player is the thing that extends HTML element. Now notice we're not extending lit element here because this component is not going to have lit in it at all. We're going to have some UI components later on to use for the control bar that we will be using lit for, but this component right here, our video playback component, we're not going to use lit. It's going to be all vanilla JavaScript, so all web standards, no libraries to help us. Now, when you think about it, this is just a video player component. We're going to have some UI that we're going to use, and we're going to bring in lit when we're working on that. But in this component right here, it just plays video. So all we're going to have it is a video tag, and we're going to have some slots as well. But we're going to have very minimal DOM here, and there's not going to be really a UI to manipulate. So at this point, I'm not feeling a need for lit. So that's why it extends HTML element. And we're actually going to build on top of this as well. So this is our base class. We're going to use this base player for something in the future that it's not going to play video, but it will act like a video player. So this is why we're creating this base class right now. But since we do want to play video right now, let's add on top of that a class to extend that. So I've just popped in this video element component here, and we know it's a component because scrolling all the way down, we're using custom elements define video element to extend video element. And right away you're noticing, hey, you're using custom elements.define. Yeah, I am, and that's because it's a web standard API. We're not using lit. And of course, video element is the class we're defining right here that we just added. And like I said, it extends base player to pick up all the capabilities that this base class has and add on to it. Add on to it as a real video player. So as we scroll down here, we hit our constructor, and right away, you can tell we're not using lit because we're creating our own shadow root here. We're creating our own shadow DOM. You never had to do this in lit. In fact, you have to take extra action to turn it off. It's not automatic though, and since we're using the very basic web standards, the basic JavaScript APIs to make a web component, we have to do a few things ourselves. And again, this is not very lit at all. We're setting the inner HTML of our component. We're adding some style through just style tags in a string. And we're adding a video tag as well. If we were using lit, we'd tell it to render this. It would be declarative, but we're not using lit as a helper. But again, we're not changing this DOM at all. We're just setting it up and using it. And that's all we really need. And of course, there's some more differences to using just the basic JS API for web components, which is one of those things is to make sure the browser is watching for attributes that you're listening for. That might change is to set which attributes those are. So we're going to watch use camera. We're going to watch source, is looping, playback rate. So when those attributes change on this component, we're flagging to the browser that we're going to watch these attributes. And when those change, we have an attribute change callback to pick up on those and take action. So you might notice that when this attribute does change, like source, this is where we're taking action on it. So when the attribute changed, when we listen for that, we're taking action. We're loading another source. We're setting a private property to be the new value. And this brings us to another thing, which is setting properties instead of attributes. So we're actually doing this in the base class. So let's check out where we set the source. So we have a source getter and we have a source setter. So when you set the source through JavaScript, dot property syntax. So when you say dot source equals on your web component, it's going to use this source setter. And all this source setter is going to do is it's going to set the attribute to match. And it's kind of important here that this is all we're doing, is setting the attribute to match the property here. If we took action on this and we weren't just setting the source, you get into an infinite loop if you do much more than this. So when we set the source here, we're just setting the attribute. And remember, when the attribute gets set as a result, that's when the changes are going to happen. We take action, update the video player with the new source. There's a very delicate balance here, or a dance, to making sure your attributes and your properties are in sync like this. It's called reflection. And it's a little wordy here because we're just using the standards. There's a lot of code behind this, where if we were using lit, it would just do this for you automatically. It would do this reflection for you automatically. And as we go to our video element class here, you might even have noticed that all of our attributes here that we're listening to are lowercase. This is another thing that lit helps you out with, because it's very case sensitive, these attributes, and lit kind of normalizes that for you, makes things easier to work with. But for us, because we're just using the web standards, we have to be very careful about making sure we access these attributes using the right case. So using lowercase like this, it's very easy to just not get into mistakes if everything's lowercase. So now in terms of like the rest of the stuff in here, it's mostly just custom logic for video playback. I'm not going to get into it because we're not really focused on JavaScript or TypeScript here. I'm focused on making web components. So that's what I want to show today. But now that we have a web component that should work and play video back, this being a video element, we can use that tag. Let's try this out. So we need a demo page. Luckily, we already have one created for us. We just have to tweak it a little bit. So let's go into dev and then look at our index. And let's change this to video element.js. And of course, we got to change our tag as well, video element. We don't have any slots yet, so we can just get rid of that. And let's set them style, where video element is going to have a width of 640 pixels and a height of 480 pixels. We're also going to display it inline block. And of course, we need something to play back. So let's copy in at least one sample video. So I'm going to add that to this folder right here. Now let's tell our video element component to play this video. And that is sample assets, sample video.mp4. So that should do it. You'll notice though that we still have some files for my element at the root here. This is how TypeScript is set up to build these files in this template from lit, is to place them all in the root. And I think as we come closer to publishing this component, you'll see why this is a very good thing that really I hadn't considered before. But this is not the right one. It's my element. We want video element. So I'm going to delete these files that there aren't added to Git, but they're still there. So I'm just going to get rid of them. Now, if you look at our tsconfig file, you can see that we're including everything that we need. Anything that's in the source, it'll get built. So fingers crossed, all we need to do is build this again. So we're going to do npm run build, make sure the TypeScript runs, and it does. And so you can see that not only did video element get built, our base player got built as well, because this is all in the include path for TypeScript. So this is great. Let's add these to our gitignore. So I am going to do top level is going to so far be bass player, and we'll just do a star for that, and then video element, another star for that. So this takes care of our TypeScript declaration file, our JavaScript file, our JavaScript map file. All of this stuff is stuff we don't want checked in to our GitHub repo. So let's save that, and the color changes so we know it's ignored now. So that's great. So maybe our demo will run now too. So let's do npm run serve and load up our demo page. So get into our component demo, and we have something. Let's take a look. Looks like a web component. We have a shadow root. We have a video tag where sample assets, we're trying to play a video, and it looks like we almost are here. So what's happening here is there's just not playing. So we could have an autoplay feature right here on this video tag, but unfortunately with Chrome, if the user does not take action first on the page, it's not going to play. It's going to refuse autoplaying. So let's try this. Let's try adding a button to our demo page that says play, and that'll trigger our component through the JavaScript method that our component has to play the video. So let's do that. So as we go back to our demo page here, we're just going to add that button. We're going to use a line break to separate it out, but other than that, it's going to query the video element that we have on the page, this one right here, and just trigger play on it, and that's going to read start playback. So let's try that and just reload our demo page, and here we go. We have a playback button, and we have our video player right here. And here we go. We're playing back a sample video. And while we're here, I want to be able to switch the source to a camera as well. So let's add a label that says use camera, and then an input checkbox where when it changes, when the checkbox changes, we're going to use the camera or not. So again, we're going to target our video element, and the use camera property is going to be triggered, and it's going to be set to the checked value of the checkbox. So now let's try our demo again, and as soon as we load our component demo, we can choose use camera, and it'll flip over to our camera feed right here. Now the last thing I want to do in this step is I want to actually have the video player, our video component, generate some events so it can tell us, what the current playback time is, and when did you start playing. So I'm going to add some listeners for those events, but these events need to be dispatched in our component itself. So let's go back and add those in. So to get this going, I'm going to add an events file. So what this file is going to do is, when I want to dispatch an event, for example, I might enter a string that says video end or video pause. But it's easy to screw those up. So if you're not typing the exact right string, your events aren't going to fire, or they're not going to be listened to. So this is a good way, especially with TypeScript, to create some static constants where you can just look up the event you're using, and instead of typing the string and failing to type the string, we can just use these constants. So we're going to start with the bass player class. We're going to import events from events. When the component's ready, when the connected callback fires, or when it gets added to the DOM, this component gets added to the DOM, we're going to fire off a ready event. Now the video element classes, of course, where most of our logic lives for working with videos. So we're going to add an event when the source changes. We're going to add an event when the video loops. So when it's finished playing and it starts up again, if it's looping, we're going to add that, hey, this video's looped. We're also going to add a video when the video pauses. We're going to send an event out for that. We're also going to send out an event for when the video metadata gets found. And we'll dispatch an event when the video ends. And keep in mind, we're bubbling these events, so it's going to pass through any number of layers down to the page. We can capture it any layer we want to. It's also composed, so it reaches beyond the shadow boundaries. So again, it can bubble down anywhere it wants. And then here's an event we're going to be listening for on our demo page, which is video play. When does that video play? When does it start playing? And another event we're going to use is the timer update. So as each second ticks by, we want to query the time, so it's going to tell us. So now, before we demo this, let's just build all that TypeScript out. npm run serve to run our demo here. So I'm going to start my playback. And if I open up my console, we should be getting some events. So here we go. And these events, you know, they're right here. We're dispatching the time update event. We're dispatching the video play event right here. There's a lot of logic around this. And like I said, we're not going to focus on all the logic here. It's just JavaScript / TypeScript. What we really want to focus on is the component itself. And, you know, to that effect, I think we have a pretty good video playback component right now. But all it does is play video. You have no control over it, really. So you want to be able to pause it, you want to play it, you want to scrub that video. So that's where we're going to go next. We're going to create those UI controls that sit right in our player. And in fact, it's going to sit right in a slot too, so we don't have to bake it right into the player. So stay tuned. That's where we're going to head next.